Good morning, X Winterview, back again with another brief dialogue for his dear friend, Annastacey. This morning's brief dialogue is on I don't know. It actually is on I don't know. That's the subject of the dialogue. I don't know. This follows on in some ways from the dialogue on the known, knowingness, and so on and so forth. So just to briefly recap on that subject. The field, you could say, of consciousness, awakeness, awareness, whatever you want to call it, it's unnameable really, but has one of the qualities, you could say, is a knowingness. I know that I exist, for example, might be a way of saying it. I know that something's happening, you could say, perhaps. There's a knowingness of one's existence, but without extrapolating as to what that existence is, or who exists, or anything like that. It's just a knowingness. Within the appearance, what the content of awakeness, within the world of stuff, the time-space world, appear thoughts and feelings and so forth. And these form what we might call the basis of knowledge or stuff. This is what I know. It's kind of a confusing way that society or culture has come to express that I know this fact. The actual experience is more accurately put as I experience this fact. This thought, for example, appears in consciousness. This idea appears in consciousness. I experience thought is perhaps a little bit more refined way of saying it. Not that it matters, but it's just a distinction that can take off a little mental pressure. The pressure to know, the pressure to hold knowledge, the pressure to think that you have to figure everything out all the time, otherwise you'll explode in a puff of purple smoke. This comes to the core of this dialogue, is that if thought is just an experience, if facts and thoughts and feelings are experienced rather than known, then the knowingness in and of itself is atheoretical or amorphous. It doesn't know what it knows, it just is a knowing. And so what happens if the mind is switched on this morning? It quickly realizes that if thought is experienced, or thought is an experience and not something that is known necessarily, then we end up in a very peculiar space, you might say, a place where nothing is known. Liberation, broadly speaking, describes the loss of or an absence of a contraction that gave a sense of a centeredness to life. It's a sense that here I am, centered here in the body or as the body, and then there are beliefs that swirl around that, and evidence that that's the truth will surround that contraction, you could say. Contraction's quite a good way of putting it. The liberation or realization is the release of the contraction. No one can release that contraction. There's no agent who will do that, who can activate the release of that contraction, because there is no agent. The contraction gives the appearance of agency, or the sense of agency, the sense of being someone. the spiritual search gives the impression that the agent is undertaking tasks that will release that contraction. You could possibly suggest that the contraction as in and of itself is uncomfortable, and in some way something is seeking a resolution to that. But that's getting pretty conceptual there, and might give the mind the idea that there's some agent somewhere else that is seeking the contraction, which is not the case. So if there is just a contraction that gives the appearance of a sense of center, which we call self or me, but that knowing that that is artificial or presumed, then if just using logic, not even using any special wisdom, just using logic, then there isn't anyone here that knows anything. And in liberation, when that contraction is released, or when it is realized, the fiction of the self-center is realized, it's realized that no one realizes it, in a way, which is extraordinary. So that suggests a knowingness is an essence, you could say, of the awakeness itself. It gets a little bit conceptual there for my liking, because the lack of knowingness, let's not forget, means that there's nothing that can be said. It's indefinable, it's unknowable. So even putting concepts like awakeness and contraction and loss of self and all that is very, very provisional language, because these talks, I feel, often unwittingly give the sense that the language knows something, it points to something that can be known, it's real. The words create that sense, and that's not just in these dialogues, a lot of books and other talks. You get the sense, because the talker or the author is using the similar terminology, the mind starts to really lock on to that, like, yes, every author is saying it's about this thing called awakeness, this thing called consciousness, this lack of self, and therefore it has to be something to do with that. And inevitably the mind brings in its own ideas about what that means. So this is a pointer or reminder talk about the unknown knowingness that is. So these thoughts and feelings and things that arise in this aware space, you could say, are experienced. But being experiences, it doesn't mean that anything is known. It's all provisional. There's no one in the center to know anything. No one knows this. There's no one here who has knowledge. I'm belaboring this point. It's very important, I feel. And there's no one here to know it, and there's nothing to know. Nothing can be known. To give you a very simple example of the experience of thought, to explore this a little bit, let's use my own daily work as the example. Most people have a broad-ish understanding of psychology or counseling or whatever you want to call it, such that movies have done a lot to, promote that. But I could be sitting with a client, and that client might say something along the lines of, let's choose a common mental health concern. Depression is very common in the clinic, that is. And they come in and they might know about depression already and tell you they have depression or they feel depressed, etc. And I could take that on board and roll with it. But they might not know what depression is. They might come in and say they feel sad or tearful or low, no energy, change in appetite, loss of hope, life is meaningless, can't get out of bed in the morning, irritable, can't concentrate, and so on. And being a psychologist, the mind here experiencing this being said triggers just, we'll call it brain wisdom, stuff that the brain has learned over time about psychology, to start firing other thoughts. Sounds like depression. Sounds like they're talking about depression. This sounds like depression. Okay, sounds like they're depressed. So that's experienced in this space. The psychologist is experiencing those thoughts. But the interesting thing is that there's no referent, that the thoughts do not refer to anything that can be known, or we presume, here's another way of putting it, we presume that the thoughts refer to something outside of us, something real, that this person is across from us is a person who is describing something real. But that's a presumption on our part. So if we remove the presumption, got to clear my throat. If we remove the presumption that our thoughts refer to anything, just because it is a presumption, then we're left in a very funny space. We're left in literally floating in space, experiencing thoughts that we don't know if they refer to anything. And second to that, there's no one here who knows that. No one knows thought. It's very peculiar to try and describe. No one here knows that. They certainly seem to pop in and out of the mind or experience. But beyond that, I don't know anything. There's nothing else that is knowable here. There could be thoughts that extrapolate on the meaning of the depression or the causes of the depression. And again, those thoughts are experienced in this space, but not by anybody. So the we'll call it enlightened space, which is a really yucky way of saying it, is a mystery. No one knows it, and there's nothing to know. But when the mind hears that, it doesn't really know how to process it very well. It's because it's used to using points of reference. It somehow still likes the idea that someone doesn't know. Okay, I don't know anything. No, it's not even that. It's worse than that, you could say. It's not that you don't know anything. It's that nothing is knowable and no one is there to know that. Nothing is knowable and no one is there to know that, which is a funny thing, because life more or less seems to sort of work somehow broadly across the board. This points to an incredible mystery. How is it all held together if no one's doing it? If there's no God controlling it all? If there are no people in the in the appearance doing stuff, then what's going on? This is where the mystery, to me, is beautiful. It's exquisite, in fact. When the world is seen as the appearance that no one is doing, it's not going anywhere, it's timeless, it's not scary, it's not flat and, oh, is that it? You know, it's incredible, beyond description, beyond the ability to describe. So there's an equal sense of thought narrating on the appearance. It's this, and there's an equal sense that that's meaningless, that those thoughts are empty, and the points of reference for those thoughts are empty, or non-existent, in fact. So it's like living in a dream. And that analogy is used quite often in spiritual literature. It's like a dream. And if you refer to the normal dreams that we have at night, to compare that, there's a stunning similarity to a nighttime dream and to your daily life. There's a couple of key differences, you could say. Daily life seems to have more continuity. The linear story of daily life unfolds with more predictability, you could say, something like that, and seems real somehow. But and the time jumps. The daily life has a critical filter that suggests things are right and wrong, whereas dreams, you're riding a dragon over a lake, and that's okay in a dream somehow. It's not. The critical mind doesn't go, hey, what's going on? It's just accepted totally. But in the dream, there's still that sense that this is how it's similar. There's still that sense that you're there in the dream, living your life in the dream. And it still feels that the stuff in the dream is real at the time. This is real. This dragon I'm riding is a real dragon. The lake down below me is a real lake down below me. But when you wake up in the morning and you go, oh, it was just a dream, try and explain to yourself now, when you're awake, how it is that you thought all of that was real in the dream. I would suggest that you won't be able to. You'll struggle. How did I think it was real at the time? What marked it, or what gave it that sense of being real? The same thing, therefore, is true in your waking state. I'm saying to myself now, let's just say that this is real, my life is real. Yet, now I've got a problem, because I know that I'd say the same thing in a dream. It's real. It's really happening. This dragon is real. How am I being confused about this? I'll let you chew on that Zen koan. How is it? So is there any practical value to the imagined self? You could say that even an intellectual understanding, just intellectually understanding, can in some ways take a little bit of the pressure, the chomping at the bit feeling that I've got to do everything and hold it all together and be amazing. That can be relieved in some ways, not necessarily amazingly, but it can form a little bit of stress relief in some sense. Just to think about that can take that pressure off a little bit. But when you think about that too, what I just said, there's something more amazing there, that no one is saying this. This is coming out of nothing right now. These words are arising out of a mystery, out of I don't know what, and they're being spoken, and it seems like they're being spoken to someone else. That's the sense of those words. But now, after this exploration, we know there isn't anyone else. But the person hearing these words will feel like that they're there as a person, and perhaps will seem to make some changes or have an effect on them, and it'll seem like, yeah, those words had an effect. But there's no one there that it has an effect on. And no one knows that. It's very funny, it's very peculiar, and in some ways brilliant. Like a brilliant con. The most brilliant con in the world. Like this real pulling the wool so beautifully over the audience's eyes. There's that term that magicians, I can't remember what it's called. I think it's distraction. It's like a technique that magicians use, that at the start of the magic trick they distract or divert attention. They have the audience looking perfectly in the wrong place whilst they do their little sneaky sleight of hand, or something very boring actually happens mechanically that once it's changed and the audience didn't notice, when the audience's attention comes back to the broader set, the magician raises the sheet with a flourish and says, "Here's the tiger," while the audience might have been looking over at something else the tiger is wheeled on in the background. No, sorry, it really is magic. They really have special powers. But that's the sense there. The whole appearance is so beautifully orchestrated in a way that seems real and personal. But it's actually, and this is still mind-blowing, it's actually the opposite. It's unreal and impersonal, but it appears real and personal. But it's neither. That's the ultimate trump card there. It's neither, because why is it neither? Because nothing is known about it. It's all how it appears to unfold. So you just have to kind of roll with it. Anyway, that's another brief dialogue coming to a conclusion as I arrive at work, eagerly anticipating my first coffee of the day, and then a full day. Thank you for listening. Comments, welcome.